Hi, I'm Mr. C in the wood shop here, and I'd like to talk to you today about routers. And we have a whole bunch of different routers here that we would use for different applications in the wood shop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this router, which is the smallest one. This is a laminate router, and typically we use this for small jobs. And when we work with plastic laminates for countertops or things like that, we'll use this. And we also use this with veneers. Sometimes we do a lot of veneering here with exotic woods, and sometimes we'll need to just trim the edges after we've gone ahead and veneered up a surface. So we'll use a router like this, and this happens to be a small trim laminate router or a trim router. And how this works is this: I take this little latch here, I unlock that, and as I spin this portion, it will bring the base up or down, whichever is appropriate for what we need. This happens to be a flush trim bit, so I would bring this down like this and lock this in place like that, and this will allow me to go ahead and trim a laminate or a veneer. And our on-off button on here is this little red button here. I pull that up, that would be turning it on. Pushing it down would turn it off. Also on the top we have the feature of variable speed. Typically we're using a very small diameter bit, so that means that we would be able to have this run at full speed, which is typically right around 21,000 RPM. Okay, this is the wrench for this tool, and what I would do is I have this little red button here. This will lock the spindle. Then I would use this wrench and I would loosen up the collet, not a chuck. Loosen up the collet, I can pull the bit out, put a new bit in, then tighten it up by pushing this red button here. Will allow for me to go ahead and tighten up that chuck, tighten up that collet, okay? Now once I've done tightening it up, I'm go ahead and it's set for me to router. Okay, and then I'll talk about proper routering procedure in a minute, but I'd like to go through and tell you a little bit about each different router that we have here. But this machine, or this handheld laminate router, is for small jobs, okay? It's really, really nice because it's nice and fits in your hand real well, and you can balance it very easily. It's just for trimming a surface, typically, is what we use it for in here, okay? Now our next router happens to be what's called a Porta-Cable 100. This is for smaller jobs, and this is typically a great router to use 1/4 inch collets with 1/4 inch shanked bits. We have two different size bits in here. I know that they're in the manufacturing of router bits, there are 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch. But instead of us having collets for each one of those and setting up machines for all three different sizes, I prefer to keep it where we have 1/4 inch shanked and 1/2 inch shanked router bits, okay? Right here you can see the collet. I'm gonna take this base off, okay? And you can see here, this is a 1/4 inch collet. This would require a 1/4 inch router bit, and this is placed inside here. And what I do is I bring it all the way down to the bottom to where it'll be touching the bottom of the machine, pull it out 1/8 of an inch, then I would go ahead and tighten up the bit in here. And how I would do that is I would take this. Now I happen to have the wrenches for each machine here. And I would take the small wrench and then the larger wrench, place it on here, and just go ahead and give it a little bit to snug it up, probably 10 pounds, 15 pounds of pressure. But once I'm set, I set this larger wrench here and set it on the table. Then I place this wrench here, and I can push this down to give me that 10 to 15 pounds of pressure without snapping my hands or anything like that, okay, as far as tightening up the collet. Now, to loosen the collet, what I would do is, this is locked in here nice and tightly, but let's say if I wanted to loosen it, I would take the same two wrenches, put this wrench on the top, hold this down this way, place this wrench on the collet here on the other part, and I would push down. And that way my hands, did you notice how I kept my fingers open where I didn't smash my hand? I want to open it up like this, and this would loosen this up so I can take this bit out and I can replace it with a different bit. This happens to be a 3/8 inch roundover bit. I brought it up 1/8 of an inch. Tighten that up. Now I'm going to remove my wrenches. Now this is what's called a standard base router. So this base, I take this and I take it and place this in here nice and firmly, and as I spin this portion of it, the bit will come, or the machine will twist inside the base and expose the bit, okay, like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and set this just like this and lock this in place like this. You see that the bit is not as clear of the base. I can store this in the cabinet behind me just like this, and I don't have to worry about damaging the bit, okay? But when I go to router, I'm going to loosen up this little handle there, spin the base to the desired depth that I need for whatever the job requires. And let's say it was just a 3/8 round over, and it doesn't have a step to it, and I have it just set just like that, okay? Now, because I'm going to place this down on the bench, I'm going to go ahead and loosen this up. Tighten it up where the bit is below the base surface, so that way I don't damage this, and then place this here. Like I was saying, is I have all the wrenches for each tool with the machine itself, okay? So that's one of the smaller routers. This router right here is the most commonly used router in our wood shop here. This is a Porta-Cable 690. It's a 1.5 horses. It's typically enough power to do whatever we need to. And inside here I happen to have a 1/4-inch collet. I do shift them. There are a couple of 690s that have 1/4-inch collets, some that have 1/2-inch collets, but this basically works the same way as this machine, except the only thing is instead of a little lever lock, I have a little flip, and this will allow for me to twist the machine to go ahead and let the base go up or down, okay? And then the wrenches for this are these two right here, and they're right next to the machine inside the cabinet, so that way you have easy access. We just make sure that we put everything away exactly where we found it. That way it's very easy for everyone to go ahead and use the machines, okay? All right, so this is a standard base router also. The thing is with the standard base routers, okay, these two standard base routers, when you turn them on, they go from 0 RPM to 21,000 RPM, or right around there, immediately. So you really want to make sure that you're holding on to the equipment firmly to make sure it doesn't jerk out of your hand. I'll address that a little bit more, a little bit further in the video, so you know exactly what I'm talking about as I demonstrate that, okay? But these routers, you adjust the base and the router motor itself for the height and depth of the bit, okay? Now, those are standard base routers. Here's where things get a little bit different. This happens to be a plunging router. So I have this handle here. This will allow me, when I loosen it up, I can plunge the bit down, up and down, and I can lock it in place. So typically, you'll have some type of fixture set up, which is like a guide, okay? And we'll talk more about different fixtures that we can use for routers, because there's endless different fixtures for routers to use depending on the job that you have at hand. But I want to just explain to you how this one works, this router. This router has a variable speed. It has the button here that you have to push, as well as to press the trigger for it to start up. The beautiful thing about this router is